So me and Brett recorded this last year, just after a couple of weeks after London Grand Tournament. It's taken a while to edit up. It's slightly out of date now because obviously since this recording we have had the season 4 update, but it's still quite relevant in as much as it's about a great insight into the way that Carlo builds his lists and the way he approaches tournament games and the way he sort of sees his matchup. So I figured I'd still release it because it's something that, as a competitive player, I would like to listen to, and hopefully you guys feel the same. There is also quite a big announcement at the end, so if you staged in the recording, there is an extremely relevant and special announcement by Ycats Miniatures. So yeah, we hope you enjoy the recording. It's a really good conversation between myself, Brett, and Carlo. Yeah, enjoy the recording. How's it going, Song of Ice and Fire fans? It's Grant and Brett from Ycats Miniatures bringing you a brand new series, Trial by Combat, where we interview some competitive players. First off, Brett, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing pretty well. How are you?
Not too bad, mate. Living a dream. I'm beginning to become a little bit resentful of you making me do late night interviews, though, because I sort of feel like I've got to drink Red Bulls to keep pace.
Well, this type of stuff's important. We got to deliver for the community.
We do. But I mean, there is the option. You could always move to England to make these things easier.
That is a valid option, actually. It's probably not a bad idea.
Don't make a decision yet because we've got to talk to Carlo first. So yeah, as I mentioned, our guest is Carlo. How you doing, Carlo?
Great. Thanks for having me on.
No, it's good to have you on, mate. It's good to have you on. What I'll do is I'll introduce you a little bit here because people obviously know you are anyway, but I've got to pretend that I'm professional at these things. So obviously, if those don't know, Carlo's the creator of Song of Ice and Fire Stats. He's the recent LGT winner and the not so recent Welsh GT winner. So how you doing today, man? How's life treating you?
It's good. I'm currently preparing also to go to Poland. I'll be traveling to the Polish National Championship, which will be happening this coming weekend. I don't know when this will actually go out, so it might have already happened. Yeah, so my mind's very much on Song at the moment. It's been a few weeks since the LGT, but I'm still really got my mindset in competitive Song at the moment. Keeps me up at night thinking about matchups, thinking about things that could go on. Really been doing some research into some of the big players will be at Poland. It's going to be a really big event and there's going to be a lot of strong players there, so really trying to put my best foot forward for that one.
Yeah, that'll be really good, mate. I mean, I've been talking to a couple of the guys from the bunker and obviously it was really good to see you because you won the Welsh GT with Baratheons, right? And then you've won the London Grand Tournament with Night's Watch. Are you running Night's Watch for this one, or are you going to run another faction?
Well, I always try to change faction after I win a tournament with a faction. So we're still trying to think about whether or not I feel comfortable enough to take on the 180 people that it's supposed to be in Poland with something else. But I think I'm coming around to the idea of what I'll play.
Brett, I reckon he's going to throw us a curveball here. I reckon he's going to run free folk. What do you reckon?
I don't think so. I think he's got a midget in his pocket. I think he's probably debating Lannisters.
Ah.
He's always been a Lannister guy, but he's proven that he's also been the premier Scorpion player in a Song of Ice and Fire since its release. Throwback to the
Team Super League, I think.
Seniors, El Senor Builder List, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that is. So since its release, he's been a big Scorpion guy. So
yeah, I've always been a fan. They've been through a whole set of iterations. Sometimes a lot more expensive and more powerful. Sometimes, right now they're quite cheap. But not quite as big of an impact. I love the control that they give to the battlefield, but I'm sure we'll come onto the list and how it plays out.
Yeah, well, so let's go straight into the LGT then. So obviously, congratulations on the win on the LGT, mate. Me and Brett obviously talk about your skill quite often, so there's good players in there, but yeah, me and Brett had a secret bet that you was going to win and bet Brett that Mickey was going to win. So now Brett owes me 300 quid. So shame on you, Brett. But anyway, yeah. So how was the experience of the LGT, man? How did it all come together?
Yeah, it was really great on the weekend. Well, I mean, I will kind of dash in there. I was actually quite ill, particularly on the Saturday. So that did, that did sully the experience a little bit because I really was quite ill, particularly by the last game on the Saturday. God, I was just ready for that game to end. We had played 4 games, and honestly, by towards the end of that game, I honestly thought I was about to join the Shadow Realm. I was like actually like about to pass out. I was like sweating and it wasn't just because the game was close and tense. But yeah, I think the LGT as a whole. Obviously, I've been one of the 2 people who set up and ran the LGT in the past 2 years. Myself and Chris Eustace. Basically put the LGT, or at least a Song of Ice and Fire, at the LGT. Of course, the LGT is a really big multi-game tournament. I believe it's still the second biggest Warhammer tournament in the world, behind the Las Vegas Open. So we really built together the LGT over the past couple of years. And then this year was the first time that me and Chris had been able to compete in the LGT, as we'd handed that off over to Paul Winter, who's from the Chelmsford Bunker group down south of England. He's previously been running the War Master tournament at the LGT. He's quite an experienced TO from the LGT perspective, but also an experienced TO. He's run quite a few events through his local club at Chelmsford. So that all came together, and he and James from Chelmsford Bunker, they were running and judging and TOing the event this year. I think that in the build-up there was a little bit of apprehension. I don't think it was quite publicized in the same way as it had previously been, and there maybe wasn't quite as much documentation put out about how the weekend would run. So I know there's a lot of chatter on the Discords, a lot of questions about what was going to happen with timings and all that kind of stuff. But when it came to the weekend, it actually all just really, really ran well. I was very relieved because, the LGT had felt like a bit of like my baby. It had been our creation, and I was nervous in the build up that we hadn't heard a lot about the event. I wasn't sure quite how it was going to go, but when we got there and started playing, everything was perfect. Everything ran really smoothly. Great prizes, great judging. Everything kept to time reasonably well, but there weren't really any timing issues. They did really well to just let games complete without being too strict on timing and stuff like that of when the rounds would start. But it really worked out well for me, and I was really pleased at both my own performance, but also how the event ran as a whole.
Just on the clocks, I think sometimes just the threat of the clock being there is enough to speed the game up. That's enough that it sort of gets done within the time given.
Yeah, I think clocks were the main discussion point, we should say. There was a lot of apprehension, tension around how clocks exactly were going to be implemented, and I think it's a really, really worthwhile discussion point in competitive song in general. And it really is, in my mind, a big question of whether or not the community, as a whole, are ready for it, and how it impacts the game. As an aside to the main event, over the past couple of years and this year too, I've been running what I call the A Song of Ice and Fire Invitational. So this is a much smaller invite-only top competitive players, top-ranked players through the Song of Ice and Fire stats site, but also tournament winners and as many internationals and big names as I can try and get together on the Friday before the main event takes place, playing in a knockout bracket. Now, those players, as the most experienced competitive, most experienced tournament players in the A Song of Ice and Fire scene in general, I think are all very much ready to play under the clock. And so I run that tournament with clocks for the past couple of years. Now, I mean, even last year, there were some discussion points around whether or not they were implemented right. And so I made some changes, but those players are very much ready for it, I feel. Now, excuse me, what the LGT main event chose to do was have the top tables. I'm not exactly sure how many tables had clocks. I think starting from the second round. And so a lot of people weren't sure about whether or not they would be under the clock and how exactly that would go ahead. But I think that when you get to the table, unless you let the clock dominate like your thoughts, unless you become nervous about the clock, clocks really do help just advance the game and make people make decisions quickly. I'm very pro clock, shall we say, on that side of things. But I do understand that a lot of people, it can really be very off-putting, and then they're not really like ready for that. For a lot of people, even just coming to a big event like the LGT could seem quite intimidating, and then to be told that they have to play under a chess clock, and like that's just going to add a lot of tension and a lot of nervousness about competing, and may keep people away from the event. So I think that there's a real balance to be struck. But I am of the opinion that playing under clocks, if it can be normalized and if the community can become okay with it, leads to a really good place. It's just whether or not we can get the community on board with that.
Yeah, Brett, bring you in there, mate. Have you played on the mini clocks?
No, I've never actually played an in-person event that actually uses a clock. Typically, I don't really have a problem finishing games. I think I might play a little bit fast though, so I understand that that's not the case for everyone. So I wouldn't pretend like, the fact that I finish games is indicative that I'm doing something right and other people aren't. But I really don't have a problem with it. I can see the benefit to it, but I've definitely, obviously running U.S. Nationals, I was able to see we had a number of games that didn't go to time, kind of not even close. So it could definitely be a thing. I was observing some games, and there are moments where, sometimes players, I don't think they do it intentionally. You just don't realize how long you're sitting and thinking about a move, and it really kills the time that you've got to play the round. So I kind of actually support them to some extent after judging U.S. Nationals.
Cool. Okay, so what we do first, then we'll have a look at your list. Though you went with two list formats. So you had Jon Snow and Cotter Pike. So you had your Jon Snow list said John in Ranger Hunters, Cold Hands Mysterious Ally, Builder Scorpion Crew, Ranger Vanguards, Ghost, and the three NCUs Corin Halfhand, Donald Noyer, and Lord Varys. And for the Cotter Pike list, you had Cotter Pike in Golden Company Swordsman, Cold Hands, Ranger Vanguard, Shadow Tower Spearman with Gren, and three NCUs, Corin, Donald, and Sir Dennis. Now, looking at the games, it looks like you sort of only ran the Jon Snow list. Do you want to talk us through why, and sort of, it would be nice sort of getting an idea of how you went about your list building process for the LGT, if you wouldn't mind.
Absolutely. So there is actually a small mistake on the site. I know. I did run. I ran the Cotter Pike list once. So in the 7 rounds, I ran John 6 times, and I ran Cotter 1 time. The John list, obviously being the list that I ran by majority, is a list that I'm very comfortable with. I think that comfort with a list, comfort with a commander is very under appreciated, shall we say, in the competitive community. I think really knowing the inside out of your own list is very, very important. But this John list, while obviously it's a little bit different, which I'll talk about in a moment, to how it was just before the Season 3 update, it still plays very, very similarly and has nearly exactly the same components as I was using in Season 2. And I did also win tournaments with it in Season 2 before the changes. So what changed between Season 3 and Season 2 between these lists is, of course, that Cold Hands increases in cost by 1 point. But he becomes an absolute wrecking ball in that exchange. So he goes from 4 points to 5 points. But now, instead of just being a support piece, instead of really being there to be a solo that can't die while giving out Ravenflock, he becomes a huge heavy hitter in his own right with those 6 attacks and a 3-up save. He can fight anybody. I really think that he's a bit ludicrous at the moment.
He's filth, absolute filth.
Yeah, in my mind, you can't leave home without him. When season 3 first came around, actually, I was testing some Night's Watch lists, and I was really trying to work Ranger Vanguards with the Cold Hands 1-point attachment. I'm a big fan of his 1-point attachment. I was really trying to make that work, but I just had to give up on that idea because the solo Cold Hands is just so good that I can't leave him at home. So we have Cold Hands going up in 1 point of cost, but at the same time, we also have the Builder Scorpion going from 2 attacks to 3 attacks, which, I mean, it's just a 50% increase in this unit's damage. It was a unit that I thought was, a bit of a niche pick, a bit of a tech pick in its old iteration, but now I think is really good value at 5 points. So what previously was Ranger Trackers, if I get all the different Ranger variants right, the 6-point cavalry with their ranged attack, had to lose and shave 1 point off the list somewhere to account for the increase in cost in Cold Hands. And I think that Ranger Trackers becoming Builder Scorpion is basically the only change that I made to the list between season 2 and season 3. Actually, strictly speaking, there is another change, which is Varys also massively increases in his value. I think that he's an amazingly good 4-point NCU, so he also gets added to the list. I think before I used to run possibly it was Amon. I used to flirt with a few different 4-point NCUs, but I think that Varys is, again, too good to leave at home nowadays. The other places, like, you could consider reducing Corin down to a 4-point NCU, but I think that Corin is an absolute staple of competitive Night's Watch lists at the moment. I think for 5 points, his influence effect of +1 attack, +1 move is great for 5 points. Like, I actually think that he could just be a 5-point NCU with that. End of. I would actually probably buy him. His sacrifice to stop an enemy from activating, taking any actions, doing anything for a whole round really pushes him into the stratosphere of being just game-changingly powerful. And it takes a real insight when to use him and when to keep him, because he, of course, does have to sacrifice himself. You're going to lose a very powerful influence effect and one of your activations, one of your NCUs to do this. But it is so game-changing that, like, when used right, this will win games on its own. So I think that overall, this list hasn't changed a lot since the last edition, and it's something that I'm personally really comfortable with and really confident with. So that's why I play it a lot. There is some discussion. People could say that, like, this is one of the best lists in the game. Like, it is in there in the discussion. Like, obviously, I played it heavily, six rounds out of 7, and I took it to the LGT. I obviously believe it's good. It's not without its counters. I think that there are lists that play really well into it. But as I say, I'm really comfortable with it. So that's why I kind of fall back on playing it a lot. It's very highly maneuverable. Of course, the Ranger Vanguards with their outflank, very, very powerful. The Ranger Hunters, they're not as brute force strong as the Golden Company swords are at the moment. Like, we see Golden Company swords coming up again and again and again in a lot of competitive lists. But the Ranger Hunters still have a lot of very technical things that they can do. They're highly mobile. They can attack from really far away with their maneuver and then order to take a shot. They can make melee attacks and leave combat and bounce around and really use positional play to make things difficult for your opponent. If you combine that with the Scorpion having like a big aerial denial to cavalry. I mean, if you are shooting within long range with the Scorpion, this can easily strip an entire rank off cavalry. You know, you can easily get 6 wounds, particularly if you're willing to use one of Dono Noi's rerolled orders to allow you to reroll your attacks. Get this thing within long range of some cavalry, and it can just blast them. But what its real role of the Scorpion in this list for me is this list obviously comes in at 8 activations. I think that with the new pass mechanic that came in with Season 3, it's not as important to have such a high activation count as before. But effectively, we're seeing a lot of 7s, and we also have to consider that there are still some 9s, some Greyjoy 9s, some Free Folk 9s. They're still quite common build types. And for me, being able to put out an 8 activation list which has the Scorpion, which can really, really threaten cavalry solos like Varamir. It can also threaten things like a Dragonstone Noble or the Mountain That Rides. All of those targets become exceptional ways for you to not just level the activation playing field, but regain the upper hand against units and lists that otherwise outnumber you. And if this list can get the activation advantage on its opponent, then suddenly John and those hunters become wildly explosive and incredibly elusive at the same time. They can maneuver wherever they want. And I think this list becomes a real handful to deal with if you can really get that maneuverability working on your side.
It's an extremely strong list. Me and myself and Brett have just done a Season 3 update recording for Night's Watch, and we've actually mentioned about the coring on Cold Hands. That is that's absolutely filth. When he goes to 7 dice, he becomes a unit killer.
Yeah, I mean, Cold Hands, like I say, he may have gone up 1 point in cost, and for a lot of units that is a death knell for them competitively speaking. I think that when we've seen Jorah's solo go from 3 points to 4 points, his play rate has absolutely plummeted. Nobody wants to use him anymore. There are lots of other examples. When the Free Folk Chariot moved from 4 points to 5 points, it went from being one of the most highly used units in the whole list, in the whole faction, down to being very, very rarely taken. But by going from 4 to 5, but gaining this extra armor save and these +2 attacks, he's really, like I say, turned from a support piece into an absolute bludgeon. What I like about him the most, actually, is that Stored in the Darkness is a very, very powerful and useful card inside of Night's Watch. That attach effect of having +1 attack, really, really useful, really powerful to have. But personally, I find that there aren't loads of cases. Maybe it's just a case of the way I play this list. I'm often waiting for my opponent to fully activate before I jump in and make the attack. Try and get in there and kind of attack when they can't be responded to. But that, of course, loses Sword and Darkness's one of its most powerful effects is that if your opponent hasn't activated yet, then you'll put out a panic token and a vulnerable token. Now, Cold Hands is one of the major exceptions to that, which is that I feel like he can just charge face first into units that haven't activated yet, because you're really not scared of him dying. Actually, it can be really beneficial to you sometimes, him dying, if you have And Now His Watch Is Ended out. He will just respawn behind your opponent, place him anywhere you need him. He can now start threatening to charge enemies in the rear, engaging with ranged units, all sorts of stuff after having triggered And Now His Watch Is Ended. And so he becomes such an amazing outlet for using swords against the unit that's unactivated to gain its full effect, to get those 2 tokens plus a charge plus an extra dice. If you throw in Corin in there, that can be 8 dice hitting on 3s with a vulnerable and a panic. We're talking, there's a lot of factions out there who would do anything to be able to put out that kind of attack with one of their best units. Never mind their 5-point solo, who can respawn after he dies. He is what makes the faction what it is right now. I would say that he's too good. I really do think that he's too good to leave at home. He's too good because when I play Night's Watch, can't see a competitive list or a competitive reason why I would ever not take him. So there is maybe a little bit of a balance issue around him, but I think that he's incredibly impactful to the way Night's Watch play at the moment.
Yeah, he's an absolute beast, and it's this. Brett, you actually mentioned it in the season 3 update podcast we did, when sometimes it's upsetting that the worst option you can make is to kill cold hands.
Yeah, there's times where, that's the worst thing that you can do against the Night's Watch player is kill cold hands. If they've got you locked up in particular, or whatever the case is where you can't respond to him being back on the flank, then getting rid of him and letting him respawn to that flank, and potentially open the round with a rear charge on your best unit with something like a pike aggression. It's that can be the game over. You could be in control of the game, but you just killed cold hands. You shouldn't have done that. I don't know why you did that. Now you're gonna lose. That's what it is.
Yeah. So should you take us through your second list, the Cotter Pike list, mate?
Absolutely. This is something that I actually do quite regularly when it comes to tournaments, which is this is a list which I just theorized and kind of thought that would be good, but I had never played it before the tournament. Even more than that, I had never played Cotter Pike as a commander before the tournament. So I actually do this a lot, which is that I theory about the game only with myself a lot in the build up to events. I like to not give away too many secrets about the things that I will play. I feel like one of my main advantages as a competitive player is that I can play 3 or 4 different factions, Night's Watch, Lannisters, Baratheons, and Targaryens as well. Something that I've played relatively extensively. I've won like GT level events with all 4 of those factions across various editions. I play them irregularly each at the gaming club. But when it comes to a tournament, I often really sit down and I think about the lists that exist in the game and that I expect other people to run, and I really try and break down like what I think might be a counter list to those. Or I might think about, in this case, I have this John list which I really know I'm going to play, and then I think about, well, what is it weak against? What am I worried about? Can I build a list which really supports and supplements it, or possibly just contrasts it in a way? And I think that's what this list definitely is. It's very contrasting to the John list. It's very direct. It's not. Night's Watch are maneuverable in general. Watcher on the Wall being an incredibly powerful card to keep your maneuverability high and make you able to make charges that you previously weren't able to make. Ranger Vanguards, a really, really great 7-point unit. Of course, with their outflank and their 6 movement, these guys are just very, very effectively what they are is very powerful light cavalry. They're not maneuverable heavy cavalry. They're actually just like slightly more impactful light cavalry that everybody else is fielding at 6 points. These guys are really fielding at 7, but they're definitely worth it with their outflank and their 4-up save now. So what this list is it's far more direct. It's far more confrontational. We're looking to leverage Cotter Pike's assault orders, but also I actually forget what's his multiple attack. Pike aggression. That's the one I'm looking for. His pike aggression is a very, very powerful card, and it's looking to leverage that as best as possible with the whole list. So that pairing of cards And it's really looking to go out there and not outmaneuver its opponent. It's looking to very directly make charges and kill units and then gain the upper hand from that. So Cotterpike in the Golden Company Swordsman are absolutely exceptional at leveraging the assault orders, because of course Cotterpike can now make multiple charges in a round, but also it's a really, really exceptional use of pike aggression if you compare it with your adaptive planning to gain extra attacks and precision, because the weakness or the limitation of pike aggression is that you'll be rolling your lowest attack die, which for a lot of units, 4 or 5. But if the Golden Company swords use their adaptive planning, it'll be their lowest attack die plus however many ranks that they have. So it won't be their full 10 dice attack, but you can make a 10 dice attack followed by multiple 7 dice attacks, each of those with precision. And what becomes incredibly powerful off of the back of that is pike aggression has this counter effect that you will take hits back, but there's a weird way in which the simultaneous actions between Fueled by Slaughter, which Cotterpike provides, and the pike aggression card, they're simultaneous, so they can be resolved in any choice of your own order. So you can use your Fueled by Slaughter multiple times to heal yourself after you've taken damage. So this Golden Company Swords with Cotterpike unit is so incredibly direct, so incredibly powerful that there are not very many things in the game that can stand up to a direct charge from it. Combine that with Cold Hands also being able to use pike aggression incredibly powerfully. Lowest attack die is still 6 attack die for Cold Hands. Combined with the fact that lots of people don't even want to kill him, so any wounds that he takes back from the attack, not a big deal. Even if, God forbid, he rolls incredibly well and then results in him having to take a ton of saves and he kills himself, he's still just going to respawn. So this list is really about making the most of that. I think that those elements are quite common to a lot of people. The range of vanguards, which follows that up, again, very normal. And the only thing which is kind of unique to this list, and was something that I'd theorized a lot about and felt that it had real powerful use in the meta right now, is Shadow Tower Spearman with Gren. So I think that the Shadow Tower Spearman, very great defensive stats, set for charge. They got that 3-up save now. They got unyielding, all really good things, but they're so defensive that most people aren't going to go anywhere near them. But I actually think the new use of Taunt, where it gives out a weakened token rather than forcing your opponent to charge based on a test, I think that the one weakness of the Golden Company Swordsman is that if you're really aggressive with them, they're going to get countercharged, and now you won't be able to use adaptive planning defensively because you used it aggressively. If you can use the Shadow Tower Spearman really well to weaken anybody who tries to set up a charge onto the Golden Company Swordsman because they're choosing to not charge your Shadow Tower Spearman, you can really, really save yourself against lance charges, really save yourself against a counter attack onto Cotterpike. I thought I was being wildly unique, incredibly clever. When lists were revealed, somebody told me that, other people online have been using that for ages and I wasn't that clever. But, I personally felt that I'd really come up with it by myself. I was told very instantly that this is something that Podwis, a Polish player, has been using to great extent recently online and stuff like that. But the one unique thing I think that a lot of people have overlooked is one of the other changes in season 3, I believe, though it could have been season 2, I'm really not sure actually, is that Dennis Mallister, he now has one of his effects natively, plus one for each of the units missing ranks, up to having all 3 effects, which are give out a token on attack, re-roll attack dice, and roll maximum attack dice as if you had maximum ranks. Dennis Mallister, he pairs incredibly well with the Shadow Tower Spearman. They now actually become really, really aggressive if they can give out a token for free every time they attack, or can reroll their attacks every time they attack. Makes them on 2 ranks really, really powerful. 7 dice that reroll to hit and give out a token. Suddenly becomes a really, really good attack profile. And that really doubles down with set for charge, meaning that anybody who tries to charge them, because they've been taunted, they don't want to charge something else, they're now going to have to go into the Shadow Tower Spearman. They're going to receive a much, much more powerful attack on that charge. It's going to really help the combat go their way. And in some situations, when you're looking to play a very aggressive set of pike aggression, I also think that Malister can have great use on the Golden Company Swordsman, even more than Corin's +1 dice effect. You may want to reroll your hits. You may want to give out a token every single time you attack. So I think that overall, it's really about trying to make the most of pike aggression. Assault Orders, fabulous card, but really, its use is its use. But pike aggression is the real special card in this list, the real special thing that makes this whole list wildly explosive, and that's what we're going to try and play around.
Yeah, it's sort of nice to hear you sort of talking about it and pulling it apart and sort of explaining why the certain cogs are placed in certain places. What do you think? What do you think of the list, Brett? You think you can beat it?
It's a pretty good one. I don't know. I wouldn't mind playing it. It's some of the stuff we talked about. I think Malister is really, really strong, but hearing him break it down the way that he broke it down is a bit different from the way that we explained it in the podcast. And I like your take on it as well. Sometimes you just need a reroll, man, and he's kind of that on a stick, but also the ability to play with tokens. So it's a little bit different from what I run, but I might have to give it a try, because currently I have Bowen Marsh in the list. I might drop him out for Malister just to give that a go. But I run Ramsey in the Shadow Spears, and then I've got Ranger Trackers, because I can't afford the 7-point unit with Ramsey. It could be really interesting to use Malister to put out a vulnerable token to make the Ramsey Spears even more deadly, because they already provide their own panic. So it's interesting, Carlo. I might have to borrow that from you there. The idea.
I think that variants of this list exist in quite a few places. I've seen some variants which run Ranger Vanguards twice. So I think this Shadow Tower Spearman with Gren, effectively being 7-point unit with a 1-point attachment, this 8 points. I think that this is quite flexible. I think a lot of people have a different mind of what they want to do with that 8 points specifically. I've seen some people even running a Stone Thrower. I think that is now actually what Podwis, the Polish #1 rated player in Poland at the moment, the person who is on my mind a lot, thinking about going to Polish nationals. I've been looking at lists that he's been playing. I think that he's moved into the idea that the Stone Thrower is a really good use of that 8 points. But I know that there are other UK players who like to run 2 units of Ranger Vanguards. Obviously, we're going to miss out on some use of that outflank. We don't want to be outflanking both of those units, otherwise we really won't get them to the table in time. But for 8 points, Ranger Vanguards also have a whole range of 1-point attachments that they can take, which are quite impactful. Personally, I think that the Watch Marshal, there we go, there's the name, the ability to give that sudden retreat on that highly maneuverable Vanguards, who also, of course, have their ambush ability. Being able to not pin those Vanguards down and for them to be able to constantly retreat and then charge whatever they want is another great package if you can get away with 8 points. But almost all of these lists, like, there's barely a point to spare in my mind to give that 1-point attachment. Nearly, the real conundrum of competitive Song is that 1 point is a really big investment. The things that you can get for 1 point can be really impactful. So yeah, I think that this list, more than others in the competitive sense, has some flexibility with what you can do with portions of the list. If I wasn't running Shadow Tower Spearman with Gren, I definitely wouldn't be trying to run Malister. I think that he's a very specific combo with them that I look to use. I think that I agree with Bowen Marsh being a good pick, although I would fall back on the fact that I think that Varys is too good to leave home without. If you have a 4-point slot available, I think that he's really, really powerful for that. I think that having flexibility in highly competitive lists, it's great for the game in general. It's great to see these different things, but it's quite reflective of this list being right at the pinnacle of the strongest list. Only the very strongest lists, the very strongest factions, and the very strongest commanders can be flexible in what they use while still being competitive. We saw this back when, Mance was the most dominant thing in the game. We saw Free Folk players saying, oh no, like I can run all sorts of different things. And it's like, well, you can, but that's because you're dominant. The same thing is true of Othel in the past. That Othel had some options about what he would run, and he could be good with all of them. And so I think that there is a case to be made that like Cotter is one of the most powerful things of the game right now, just because he has flexibility in what he plays and can be successful at the highest level with all of them. Kind of indicates that he's just very, very strong.
And I totally agree with that, mate, 100%. So what we do, mate, we'll try and think the best way of going through this. But I think what we'd do, if we'll go through your games, you just give us a quick summary of all the games. If you want to spend a bit longer talking to us about specific matchups, you can crack on and just sort of talk about it. But so your first game is against Carl Christie. Which one did you use, Cotter Piking?
I used Cotter Pike in the 6th game against Dan's Martells.
Okay, cool, sweet. So, yeah, first game against Cole from the bunker then. So, he's running Boltons, mate. What a hero.
Yeah, absolute hero. I mean, like, I'd never played into Boltons. I actually wasn't even sure what exactly is in their deck. I'm not as like clued in with Song as I maybe was in the past. Like I don't have a complete encyclopedic knowledge of every faction in the game right now. But that doesn't mean that I don't have a very strong knowledge of the good things in the game. So I was very aware that Boltons weren't good, but I was also very aware that I wasn't sure what they can do. And so that was very much a case that like when I got paired with Carl and his Boltons, he was the only player at the event running Boltons, and I'd never played into Boltons before. I wasn't even entirely sure like what they had. I came to the table and my first thought instantly was, I don't know my opponent's list that well, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to fall back on the fact that I know my own John list incredibly well. So that very much guided my decision to pick John. If I could be very comfortable in my own list, I can spend most of my thought process trying to make sure that I'm learning and not falling into any traps that the Boltons might have. Boltons are struggling. They are not a powerful faction, and really in just the list matchup, the faction matchup, I just like had advantages in every stage of the game. Carl was forced to take some really early charges, which were 4+, 5+ charges, and they didn't come off, and then that really just made things way worse for him. They were his best and only route to kind of trying to overcome the fact that I had all sorts of advantages over him. I was way more maneuverable. I could also hit harder, and I had this Scorpion to kind of pressure him into making the first move. So it was a very solid game from a list perspective, and I was able to totally wipe him out, get the biggest victory possible. Of course, in tournaments, I'm looking to really solidly get a crushing victory whenever possible. If I can't win the event, I am still going to try and do, as well as possible. And those secondaries are really going to matter. So yeah, just like quite a ruthless game. His list was not not in the same stratosphere of strength, and so just really took advantage of that and got the wipeout crushing victory there.
Yeah, well, so as a bit of insider knowledge there, the reason he took Bolton's is because I was supposed to be going to the tournament as well and taking Bolton's as well, and we were going to try and have a little battle between ourselves who could finish the highest for Bolton's, but then obviously I didn't make it, leaving poor Carl having to play Bolton's for the weekend. So that's entirely my fault, Carl. I do apologise. He's quite a good player. Did you played him in the Welsh GT final, didn't you?
Yeah. In the final of the Welsh GT, I played an incredibly close game with him. He was playing Martells and I was playing Baratheons. A far closer matchup in terms of the strength of the lists that we were playing. And it was an incredibly close game. Like I say, I was well aware that Carl was a player that wasn't an easy first round matchup for me in terms of player, but then when I saw that he was playing Bolton's and I saw his lists were not on the same kind of level that the competitive lists that I was bringing, suddenly I was like, okay, but my lists will win this game for me, and I don't really have to do anything major. I think that, without laboring too long on the first game, I think that that's the thing that competitive players who are really trying to win tournaments are looking for, which is that if you can come to the table and for the first few rounds, you can have a big advantage before the game even begins because you're just running like a more efficient list or maybe a more consistent list, then you can have a relatively easy game. It doesn't completely sap your energy, your thought process. You're not completely having to give everything to win this game. And then by the time we come to the third and fourth game of the day, you're a lot fresher and a lot more ready to play a really intense competitive game. And so that's why I kind of gravitate towards certain lists for their consistency and my familiarity with them, so that I can really fall back on things that I'm really sure of and not have to make really, really hard decisions too early in the tournament. And so I think that being paired against Bolton's is a really great first game if you're looking for an easy day.
Game 2, wins winner against Ben Allen. You're playing into Kevin Lannister. Do you want to give us a little breakdown on that one?
Yeah, this one was a really tough game. I'd never seen Ben before. Of course, I've travelled the length and breadth of this country playing tournaments, so I'm pretty familiar with most regular tournament players inside the UK. I've at least seen, if not played, most players once or twice before, and so Ben was completely unknown to me. But he was running quite a powerful Kevin Lannister list. Kevin is very powerful right now. He's running a Golden Company Swordsman Kevin variant. And Winds of Winter is always a difficult game mode, really. There's a lot that can happen in Winds of Winter. There's a lot that you have to think of. So very different to the first round. There was a lot for me to concentrate on. What was useful to me is that as the game progressed, it became apparent to me that I knew the game mode better than my opponent, so I could take advantage of some aspects of the way the game mode scored. That I had better knowledge of what objectives I'd picked at the start of the game and how to utilize them well. Combined with the fact that I'm also a very experienced, not just Lannister player, but Kevin Lannister player. So I was very, very familiar with his cards, and I knew what traps not to fall into with Lannisters. But it was still a very close game at times. Like I say, it was mostly the playing of the mission, the playing of Winds of Winter, which managed to get me this game. In terms of actual points on the table, the way the battle went. He actually destroyed 22 points of my army. I only destroyed 12 of his, but I managed to play enough objectives to come away with only a standard win, actually, which was one of the few not crushings that I had of the whole tournament. So it was one of the closest games I played.
You had a slightly harder one the next game against Jacob Bailey. Jacob Bailey, obviously a name that we're all used to seeing on the TTS scene and on the actual miniature tournament scene as well. How did you go against? And he ran Mance, Brave. How did you go against Jacob?
Yeah, when I got paired against Jacob, I was like, like Jacob's a player that I've played before. He's very well known on the UK scene and the TTS scene. Used to be incredibly highly rated. He's not got quite the same rating that he had about a year ago. I mean, he came second in the LGT and second in the Invitational just 1 year before. And he's a very well-known and respected free folk player. So, he's not playing some off-meta, completely new list to him. He's playing a list that he's very tried and tested with. Of course, free folk did get the rough side of the Season 3 updates, probably more than most factions. But in this matchup, I have played this matchup quite recently before the tournament. Not exactly into this Mance Raider list, but actually into Mickey's, Maserath. He runs Styre at the moment, so I do have familiarity with Free Folk and specifically this Night's Watch into Free Folk matchup. This is where the power of the Scorpion really comes into play. With Jacob running 9 activations and me running 8, the pass token for a couple of rounds is going to allow me to have activation parity. But if I can use the Scorpion to shoot Varamir very early in the game, then actually that will be an activation advantage to me. Which I can use at any given time to gain double hits and lasts and then firsts as they were. And so I put all of my early energy into trying to get a Scorpion kill on Varamir. It may seem unlikely if you kind of think about, okay, well, I've got to do 2 hits and I've got 3 attacks and I only hit on 6s at unlimited range. But actually what you're looking for is you're looking to get a panic token onto Varamir and then make 1 hit and then have him fail the panic test, because the vicious panic damage is actually where you're really likely to get the kill off of Varamir. The other thing that he lost was, I believe he lost 1 morale. He's now a 4 morale. So when that goes to a vicious with 6 morale, if you can really manipulate that into a 7, possibly with a panic token on top of that, then you're really likely to turn that 1 hit into 4 wounds. So that's what we're looking to exploit early in the game. Interestingly, I shot him many, many times using my activation, using swords, using all sorts of other things. And I was not able to kill him. I got him down to 1 wound with a failed panic test, but he only rolled a 1 on the D3. And I was thinking, this game, this isn't going to go the way I want it to go. He's still got activation control. He's still got everything on the board. And then the big moment in the game, still very early on, was I took some Ranger Vanguards, who of course have 7 attacks. I influenced them with Corin, that gave them 8 attacks, and I charged them face first into some Raiders that hadn't activated yet. They were still on 12 wounds, very, very early in the engagement. It's basically the first attack that isn't a Scorpion shot. I do it quite early in the round, and I play Swords in the Darkness. This gives them both tokens. I gain 9 attacks because of Swords, and I managed to one-shot the unit and do 12 wounds. And this is very, very powerful. Jacob, being a very experienced player, what he's looking to do is he's looking to draw me in and then counter on that. He has a lot of attacks with other units in the area that he could then, dive in on this unit. He also, it turns out, is holding on to... He's holding on to the Endless Horde to wait to see which unit I go for, and then he'll Endless Horde that unit. But because I get this absolutely unlikely 12 wounds in 1 attack, he's unable to play Endless Horde. And so it really puts him in a hole. Basically, that is game over. It is the first attack. There are still things to be done, but it really puts him so far behind that it's incredibly hard for him to catch up. That doubles down with the fact that we are actually playing Honed and Ready, which is probably the worst possible mode for him, because he will suffer damage from the walls far more readily than I will. And so that route to him just controlling the battlefield and controlling the objective isn't really open for him. So what I thought was going to be an incredibly close game, and it was very tense and it was very tactical and very situational, suddenly the dice just, they went in my favor, which honestly, they always do. Every tournament win is mostly built on the back of me getting wildly lucky at some point. But yeah, this game just blew right open, and those things happen, and it's what I played for. But obviously, it was nothing that it was even better than my wildest hopes, effectively.
Poor old Jacob. Next up, you played Forestpond with some Martells. Forest is his name I've seen on the TTS circuit. I've never played against him. You played against him, Brett?
I don't know that I have. Possibly. I don't know. I'd have to go look.
Do you want to talk us through it, Carlos?
Yes.
How did you beat him?
So Forest, I believe, if I get this the right way round, Forest is Finnish, but he's the Swedish national champion. They, of course, a lot of the Finns went over to play in the Swedish nationals, them being quite close to each other, and the Finnish not hosting their own nationals, I don't believe, that year. So he is Swedish national champion. He was also invited over to play in the Invitational. And he was one of the internationals at the tournament that I was really looking forward to playing. This is round 4, and it is very late on Saturday. This is the game at which I really was starting to feel like death warmed up. And so suddenly I was like, oh, this is not the game for me to be falling apart in. He's a very, very experienced player. But again, luckily for me, I've been, if anything, the one matchup I am most experienced with recently has been Night's Watch into Martell. The person that I play most regularly, Dan McDonald, Space Monkey, he's been playing Martells very religiously recently. And I think that understanding Martells is 80% of the battle. Martells are one of the trickiest factions out there. They're probably one of the factions that most impacts the way you should play. And if you really understand them, then I think that you then you're really gonna do a lot better than if they're catching you off guard. They have a lot of tricks. They have a lot of things to shut down your big plays. Less directly than the way Lannisters do it, but still very controlling all the same. So as I say, a matchup that I'm very familiar with, Fire and Blood, a game mode which I felt that he had a lot of cavalry in both lists, and I felt that if I could use the Scorpion and make myself effectively de facto the defender, then that would put me in a much better position than if we just played a 7 activation versus 7 activation list, which could go either way. It also allows me to push the pace of the game really early because his knights are always under threat that my Scorpion will unleash a really, really powerful attack on them. And so it allows me to force the game to come forward a bit faster, which is where the Martell deck's a bit weaker. So they were the things that I was looking for, but it was an incredibly tense, very tactically positioned game. Of course, Fire and Blood it results in a crushing victory. It's 11-6, but Fire and Blood never tells the full story because points scored can be huge off a single unit dying. And there were multiple of my solos, Ghost particularly, who was incredibly close to dying at multiple times throughout the game. And if he would have been worth 4 VPs alone. He was a marked unit and he had points on him. So this game was incredibly tense, incredibly close. It went all 6 rounds. And And honestly, I desperately wanted this game to end because, like I say, I was sweating, I was falling apart. The game went quite long. Last game of the day, a lot of people started to gather around the table. They'd finished all their games, and I felt the heat and the pressure mounting. And I was very much in control of the game. I was I could possibly even been 8-0 up with him having not killed any units yet. But he was still very much in the game. Fire and Blood is never over until it's over. As long as your opponent still has a marked unit on the table, they can score wildly large amounts of VPs at any given point. And it got incredibly close. And we just about managed to clutch this one out with Cold Hands coming up crutch, as it were. Cold Hands making a big charge, killing off some knights, scoring about 5 VPs in the process, and then that was the game over. But if that charge doesn't go well, then we could be in a totally different situation, and the crushing victory will be reversed entirely, and I will take a crushing loss very likely. It was a very tough game. And like I say, I can't exaggerate about how really that was definitely the worst situation I was in terms of I needed this game to finish, and I needed to go to bed instantaneously. So I really hope that didn't make anybody else at the tournament ill. I was very aware that I might be contagious, and therefore I should absolutely minimize my contact with anybody. But yeah, I was very, very, very pleased to get through the day. By the time I spent a little time in the evening socializing, I would have liked to spend a lot more. But by the time I'd gone to bed and got up the next day on the Sunday, I was a whole different person, and I was in a much, much better state to be able to play really tough games. So I was really glad that the first day, a number of things had gone really right for me, and that most of my games hadn't been that tense and that close. If all 4 of my games had been as close and as competitive and as tense as Forestpond, Johannes had pushed me in that last game, then there's no way I would have made it through all 4 with wins. I feel like that mental load is underappreciated in tournaments, and so if you can get through those first few rounds as easily as possible, then you're going to have a big advantage come the last round.
Yeah. Well, last year at LGT, I come away from the first day with a proper banging headache. It's just the amount of brain power having to put into it all weekend.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But well, you needed to be recharged because looking at the games of the next day, mate, you didn't have a very wasn't a walk in the park for you, was it? First game was against CallMeSophie with Lannisters. Obviously, Sophie done really well in the Invitational as well. So, do you want to talk us through that one?
Yeah. So this matchup was for me one of the most important parts about it was a Dance with Dragons. Dance with Dragons is one of the most impactful game modes in the way that you should play the game, because picking up the tokens is going to be very valuable in terms of VPs, but it's going to have that big negative effect of slowing your movement very highly. This was probably the single thing that drove me towards playing John rather than playing with Cotter Pike. So Cotter has some good stuff into the matchup, but most specifically, the use of being able to have Cold Hands and Ghost hold these objectives for me, while not committing the vast majority of my forces to really, babysitting these objectives, was what I was going for and was my main game plan. Now, Sophie chooses Gregor, as Gregor is currently Lannister's real tech choice. Very popular at the moment. I think he might actually be, considered Lannister's or rated as Lannister's number 1 commander. I'm still much more a Kevin player rather than a Gregor player. It just suits my style a lot better. But Gregor, the use of Overrun and the auto wounds generated by Gregor himself, plus Adaptive Styles precision, they really, really give the Lannisters a whole new dynamic in being able to kill solos and then overrun on to make new charges and be much, much more aggressive than they have in the past. Now, what's really ramped that list up into being more powerful than it was in the past is Battle Plan on Tyrion 1-point attachment. I think that this is the big dynamic change that Lannisters as a whole have had, but specifically most powerfully Gregor. This means that you can have either assault orders or overrun or both on demand. Whenever you need them, you can go and get them out of your deck, and that's going to be incredibly powerful. This game was crazy close. This was a game which I possibly didn't deserve to win. Sophie played incredibly well. What I knew I had to do was grab the tokens and then play as defensively as possible. And what I'm looking to do is effectively lose as slowly as possible while holding the tokens. Sophie plays very assertively and aggressively, moving up the board, and very wisely avoids all the tokens herself because she doesn't want to have her really expensive aggressive units weighed down by holding a token and only having 2 move. And so what I'm left with is I have to sacrifice Corin to either stop the Golden Company swords who have the Hound in them, of course giving them the Clegane keyword, making them a really, really powerful unit that can assault, use assault orders to charge, use overrun, and fueled by slaughter plus adaptive planning. Mega unit, absolutely powerhouse unit. Possibly one of the only things in the game that is on par with Cotter Pike in Golden Company swords. Or stop the Gregor commander himself inside of the Lannisport City Watch, who are an interesting choice. I've thought about it a lot recently, and I think that it's very much specifically an anti-Night's Watch pick. But I think it's very interesting. I think it is a good choice the more I think about it. At the time, I thought that's a waste. I don't really agree with it, but yeah, I've really come on board with it. So I have to sacrifice Corin early to delay one of those units, and I pick Gregor because he's in auto charge range, and I've used some technical maneuvering to mean that he couldn't overrun. But I'm trying to slow Sophie down as much as possible, and so she chooses to play assault orders onto the Golden Company swords, but they're going to have to make a 4-up charge, maybe a 5-up charge. If this charge comes off, it's game over, absolutely. And this is only round 2 at this point. I'm sacrificing Corin incredibly early. Sophie's been incredibly assertive and come up the board very quickly. And this charge is failed, and that is basically buying me just enough time to hold the tokens and lose slowly enough that I just about edge out the game 9-8. I score. I believe I score 8 points off of objectives, and I kill the Clegane Brigands. That's the only kill I get. Whereas Sophie's going to score 8 points without ever holding an objective. So you'll see there that, like, we're talking about, you know, Cold Hand's really sacrificing himself for the cause, really getting in the way. And yeah, it was a really, really good game. It was definitely, like, shall we say, the game that I came to play at the tournament. You know, obviously I'm at big events, particularly international events like the LGT or Polish Nationals or any other big event. You know, there's a few known names from other countries that I hope to get paired up into, and this game definitely didn't disappoint. It was everything that it was billed to be. I know that Sophie had been eyeing up where I was in the table all tournament, you know, under this assumption that we would meet at some point. And yeah, it was in the 5th round, and it was an incredibly close game. Of course, all of my games on the Sunday, rounds 5, 6, and 7, these games that this one and the next 2, they were all table 1, and so they were all actually recorded. So they will be available through Rotterdam White Scars at some point in the future. If people want to, you know, go back and see how close this game, particularly this one is, this one's a real banger.
Yeah, I think they've just dropped a video of Mickey playing, Mazraf playing CallMeSophie as well, haven't they?
Yeah, so they were filming all of the Invitational. So we see that from the Friday, currently working their way through the Invitational. Then there's games from the Saturday where they were picking painted armies and interesting matchups and players from across the range of the event. Just choosing players that generally don't get filmed. But then come the championship Sunday, as it were, they were filming table one. I did joke with Thais that when I got put on table one for the 5th round and we set down to film, I said to him, "I'm not leaving table one. you're just going to get 3 videos of me." And he laughed, but he wasn't quite so. He didn't know how serious I was about that. But this game was absolutely the de facto final, effectively. Like this was the game to really decide who wins. In my opinion, Sophie probably goes on to win the event if I don't win this game. Now, Sophie did actually lose another game, and so technically came 4th. But I think that if you see the 2 matchups that I had following it, I think that she would win those matchups. So I think if we just swap that score to be 9-8 to Sophie instead of me, which again comes, never mind that 5-up charge. If I lose that 5-up charge early on, then it's a total wipeout. But there are even 4-up charges later on in the game, which if she makes, she absolutely will win by 1 point instead of me winning by 1 point. So luck really on my side. But what I was looking for here was just to try and force as many risky outcomes as possible while losing as slowly as possible. That is something which I do probably more regularly than other players, which is I look to lose the fight while maintaining VP advantage, which I think is something that Jon Snow list is very good at.
Well, obviously you're saying you've this is one of the games you went into the tournament looking forward to playing. There's obviously the next game is a game that you've never played before, is it? Because you rarely get to play against Dan.
Dan is significantly my most common sparring partner. We play probably every other week at the Games Club, and specifically we've been playing this Night's Watch into Martel matchup a lot recently, and this is where things get really a bit sneaky, shall we say, from my part, which is Dan has become very, very familiar with my Jon Snow list. I've played it a lot. He's played it very regularly. He's played it himself, actually, sometime down the line. He is a Night's Watch player. And I've become quite familiar with his Martels. Those games at the club, they're not quite 50-50, but maybe 60-40 in my favor, which is nowhere near the kind of win percentage that I'd be looking for in a tournament game. Like most tournament games, I think that, like I want to be 95% sure I'm going to win, like outside of a total corner case of like something ludicrous happens, I'd like to feel really, really confident about the game. And I wasn't feeling as confident about this matchup as I had in the past. Dan's been playing a lot recently, and he's moved from being a good player who has a very, very good painted army, lots of beautiful conversions, much more of a hobbyist in the wider sense, into more recently in the past 6 months, past year. He's like really moved into the higher echelons of the competitive scene, regularly finding himself at top tables of the tournament, whereas before he might have been slightly above mid-table. So Dan's really, really come on in the competitive sense and has really started to push me as a player to be better. And I think that's really great. That's the kind of people that you want to be playing on a regular basis. But I know that the one thing that I have over Dan is that if I totally change my play style and suddenly go from this hyper mobile John list that he's very comfortable playing into. He's gotten very familiar with it. If I suddenly take us, shall we say, like into the realms of theory, into a list that he's never seen before, that's where we'll be right back in the element of like my thought process about games being my big strength. So I knew that if I suddenly switch lists, and it was partly actually one of the reasons that I had built the Cotter Pike list was because I had thought, like there is a real chance that I might play Dan at this tournament, and I've not been winning that matchup as much as I would like, and therefore if I build a list which he's totally not expecting, then that's really going to put me back in the driving seat. And so, yeah, he got the bad end of the fact that he's been too close for comfort in our recent matchups, and so he became a bigger thought process for me coming into the event. And so, yeah, the Cotter Pike list came out, and it was ruthlessly efficient at being incredibly explosive into the Feast for Crows game. The other thing about picking that list was I was still... This was the 6th game of the tournament. Only me and Dan were undefeated, but I knew that I would have to play a 7th game, and that if I did lose that game, it would be possible for the winner of the tournament to have 6 wins and 1 loss. There would be basically a 3-way tie for first. And that secondaries were going to be really, really important in that case. And so what I was setting up for with round 6 was that Feast for Crows can also be a very close scored matchup. A lot of people play it very defensively. It's quite common for it to only be, a narrow victory. But if I played a super aggressive Cotter Pike list, that I could really take the game like by the scruff of the neck and go out there and get the crushing win. I did not want to mess around with a really slow technical game here. I wanted to go in for the kill and go in hard. Early as possible, again, to take away that late round advantage that as the turns get longer and longer and longer, Martells get better and better and better. And so I really just wanted to go out there and put my stamp on the game, and it worked perfectly.
Yeah, well, sounds like an incredible game. I mean, I think I played them maybe once, maybe last year. I think he's such a nice bloke as well. So it always makes some games really sweet. Your next game, mate, was we returned to a Game of Thrones game mode. And it's incredible because you think like you go back 12 months, you'd never have seen Greyjoys on top table. So to see a Greyjoy player on that top table is really good to see. And I do want to talk to you a little bit about how you sort of receiving season 3 after we go through the LGT stuff. But yeah, Greyjoys on top table, mate. How did you go about forcing them back to the seaside?
Yeah. So here we are in the 7th game. I was really nervous at this point because I'm a big proponent of, if you can play more rounds than are required, then I think it's really good. I as a TO have done it multiple times, but here I am, I'm the only undefeated player, and I now have to play another round, and I'm going to have to win. And so there's all sorts of thoughts going through my mind, maybe I could just lose by a minor victory, a minor defeat, and I could still win the event, and all these different thoughts, what should I pick? And he's got a Dagmare list with 9 activations in it. Lots of drowned men, some trappers, and some archers, and then he has 1 heavy hitter, which is Dagmare in some silenced men. On the other side, he has Victarion in silenced men. I think it's 7 activations. It has 2 units of silenced men, and most importantly, it has Balon NCU. So when a unit dies, the unit can be effectively outflanked back into play. And I am terrified of this list. I'm thinking through all sorts of different scenarios about how the matchup will play out. But what terrifies me the most, going back to this idea of how confident I like to feel about the games, is that there are so many different things that could happen with this Victarion list. The way it plays out is so unknown to me, and I'm back in this idea of like the what ifs. I'm not as comfortable playing into Greyjoys. I don't get to play against them very regularly at all. Nobody at the games club that I play at plays them. So really just sporadically in tournaments I see them now and again. And I had never faced against them in season 3. So I'd never played against the new Balon. This list I am terrified of, and it's the list that I'm trying to play into. I look to play John and be as mobile as possible and probably avoid as many fights as possible. And then to my huge relief, and I think a big mistake on his part, is he picks the Dagmare list, and it's just a far more manageable process for me. He deploys quite defensively to try and stop me from outflanking with my Ranger Vanguards. And I'm able to isolate one of the drowned men and kill it incredibly early in the game. And then it becomes very, very difficult for him to assertively attack into the Ranger Hunters, because they're very strongly deployed in the center of the board. And I now, with the pass token, have effective activation advantage. So if he comes into me, I'll be able to jump on him, get tons of attacks off, and then go first again the next turn, gain an even bigger upper hand. And he just plays stay away, and much to my relief, he basically plays very slowly towards losing. He doesn't make any huge risky plays to try and get back into the game. And so it was a very comfortable game, and I think that it was always going to be once he didn't pick Victarion. But I still maintain complete and utter fear of the upper potential of what Victarion could do.
Yeah. So good talking there, man. So yeah, congratulations again on winning that. That's you've come against some of the cream of the crop there on the day. So well deserved, mate. Well deserved. So if it is to go ahead next year, you come back down to defend your title?
Absolutely, yeah. I've been playing Song competitively, like more seriously, shall we say, or very seriously, effectively, this year, I would call it. You know, like for some reason, Song, maybe just in the UK or everywhere, seems to have this almost like season of like the summer being when all these big tournaments happen. So you know, I've got Polish nationals, and then another team event, which will be a bit of a wind down of the competitive season over the next month. And then, you know, I'll probably be looking to take a bit of a break from competitive Song, you know, kind of a bit of a detox, because for me, the past 6 months, like it's been very, very all consuming of like what I'd been trying to achieve. In the past years, you know, I've been very focused on trying to run events and grow the UK community. But I really thought that this year I would dedicate myself to competitive Song, and I've enjoyed it a lot. So, you know, I hope to be playing, you know, my best competitive Song again next year. I hope that there are things on the horizon around, you know, bigger international tournaments. You know, maybe a Worlds. Does it ever materialize? They're things that I'd really, really love to see happen. And I think that keeping our big UK tournaments as big as possible are things that I want to support. So in some way, I will definitely be supporting UK nationals, be that as a player or a TO or a judge or whatever it is. I really hope to keep growing the UK community.
Yeah, great. It's great to hear, and it's really good to hear you really sort of being positive about the game, because it was a down point, not just yourself, but it's quite a down point a little while back. But I feel like we're on the up again now with the game, which is really nice to see. And there's just a massive competitive community right across, as you say, Europe and effectively the world at the minute. So I think that's why we just see a massive up flare, if you like, of of competitive gaming again. It's really cool.
Yeah, I was really, I will admit to being quite down on competitive song about this time a year ago. It's when Mance and his dominance of the competitive scene was at its peak. I always knew he was strong, but when I saw him, take all of the top spots in UK nationals, take all of the top spots in French nationals, take all of the top spots in Polish nationals, win the invitational, win all of these events, and it's not just the person who's winning, because different people are playing it in each of these tournaments. Different people are winning with the same kind of lists. I was a bit down. I was a bit defeated by this idea that like there wasn't good variety. That it was play Mance or accept second place was where my mindset was. And that's a personal thing. It's not it's not that you couldn't win. I just felt that I couldn't win. I felt that I couldn't win against Mance. That's me accepting that I'm not good enough to beat that list. But I feel like there's a much stronger, better variety right now in what's winning tournaments. We see different results out of loads of different places, and we see a much bigger range of different factions at the top of these events. And so, yeah, I think that competitive song is in as good a place as it's ever been, and I feel great about that.
Yeah, all right, mate. That's really cool to hear. Really, really good to hear. So, I've got one last question for you, Kyle, before I let you go to bed, and start painting your kitchen again. So, what's next then? So, you've got the Polish nationals. Have you got any more competitions lined up after that, or is it literally focused down on Polish nationals? Then you're gonna have the rest of the year off.
Yeah, there's one more tournament after, which I'm also looking forward to. 3 weeks after Poland, I'll be playing in the Dead Metagaming. They're running a tournament called Lords of War, which is a team tournament, which will actually be the first time I've ever played in it. Well, I guess the Team Super League online, they were team tournaments, but they weren't quite the same. This will be the most traditional kind of team tournament format, being paired up against, players live, kind of as captains. So I'm really excited to look forward to that. And also, it'll be the first time that our gaming group have like ever competed as a team. In the past, that's never really been an option. Instead, actually, most tournaments that I go to, big GTs, I expect that eventually come later on in the rounds, I will have to play against one of my own club, which I always think, is something that I've come to expect, but is never what I go to a tournament for. So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah, a team tournament with a very harsh restriction on neutrals, so we won't be expecting to see all these Golden Company swords there. And there's a new guy at our club who's going to be our fourth player, totally new to the game. He's only played about 3 games, so really hoping that he comes along and has a great time playing against some people who aren't, unfortunately, die-hard tournament veterans. So we've been trying to get him up to speed as fast as possible, and hopefully he'll get his first win at the team tournament, and really get his teeth into the game. So yeah, that's the one that'll kind of wind down. I won't take it as competitively as I say I've been taking the tournament scene this year, which was a really big focus for me to try and win as many GTs as possible back to back, going across the UK. And the LGT, to win the LGT was a really big relief, effectively, because you mentioned the Welsh GT, but in this year, I not to start telling people just how amazing I am, but I actually so I won Always Winter, which is the Scottish GT. I think that was back in March or February. That was also quite a big event, about 60-player event. So I won that GT in season 2, and then I won the Northern GT, which is run by Dead Meta Gaming. That was another 6-round 32-player event. So I won that event with Lannisters. And then I went to the Welsh GT. So it felt like I had conquered, the UK tournament scene, but had never had the chance to play in UK Nationals, always being the head judge in the past. So I'd put quite a lot of pressure on myself that this was the year, like I was really building up towards to it. I'd won all these GTs in the build-up, but that if I didn't win the LGT, then it was all going to be for nothing because, like not even national champion after all that. So I was really, really pleased to get over the line and kind of make that a complete series of wins. So it meant a lot to me. So yeah, I'll be honest, I was really, really pleased to get that win.
No, you should be. You worked hard for it, and we're actually coming up to the team tournament. I think with the Chelmsford Bunker sending the team up there. So
awesome.
I think I'm being headlocked into that one. I might bring Boltons. I've just got one quick question. I've got to be quick because I know Brett needs to get away as well as us two because obviously it's like midnight over here. So just as a question, how do you feel that we can grow the community more and sort of nurture it into get more players into the game?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. It's one that I think about often. I have my own approach, which has been very, very kind of top down, as it were, trying to grow the LGT and UK Nationals and try and grow the international TTS community. I was very big on that a couple of years back when TTS was still getting its feet under itself. But more and more of a time, I've come to feel that, like, for the UK right now, but for everyone across the world, like, it really is a grassroots kind of thing, which is something that I'm really not very good at. I'm not. I'll surprise you here. I'm not that personable. I'm not that easy to like. And so yeah, like for me, I try and take I try and take like I've in the past tried to take a much bigger view, trying to run things from an organizational standpoint. But I really think that, like, the things that Dead Metagaming have done with their gaming group, they're able to bring, at this point, they bring 16 players to a tournament. They've really got a grassroots community in their local area, and they try and teach and bring as many people into the game. And I think that anything that people can do on that side, if they can just go out and find one new person to play the game, then if we all did that, the player group would double. I think that obviously it's great to get people playing, but I guess the next step of that is encouraging and convincing people to attend tournaments. For me, like, competitive play, like, it means everything to the community. Like, you don't have to be at a tournament trying to win. I mean, I'm always trying to win my games, and I'm always trying to do the best that I can. But I think just every person who attends a tournament supports the community and supports tournaments as a whole, and supports the organizers of events, because there's nothing more disappointing than trying to run an event and having nobody really turn up for it and no enthusiasm for it. And there's nothing more satisfying than having these ideas and these great thoughts and putting a lot of effort into an event and then seeing people come to it and enjoy it and have a great weekend. So I think getting people into the game is step one, but step two is, if you have people in your local community who don't interact with the rest of the community, they don't come to these events, they're not people who would ever really think to go to a tournament. If you can convince them, be that because you've never been yourself and you need them to help encourage you, if you can both just like really commit to going to an event, I really think that's the best thing about this game. The community is absolutely amazing. The LGT community that turns up every year is gonna keep that event going no matter what over the next few years, because it is a great social occasion as well as a chance to play the game.
I totally agree. Okay, Dave. Well, thanks for your time tonight, mate. It's been really, really cool catching up with you. It's the first time we've had a proper conversation together that's not about Painted Army. So it's been cool to sort of get inside your mind of how you build lists and what your experience of the GT. Is there anything you want to sort of add to this, Brett, or are you all good now?
No, I think we covered some of the key things from the event and his takes on the meta, and I think that was the most important thing that I wanted to cover from someone who played, so many. Now we might ask you again if you win Polish GT, if you
Yeah.
if you take Night's Watch to Polish GT and you pull that one off again, we might revisit his Night's Watch OP. But no, I'm just kidding. It's nice to hear from another competitive member of the community that feels like the game's in a pretty good spot. So that's very encouraging to hear. It's good for veterans and newer listeners of ours alike. It's looking pretty good if they keep doing some of these incremental changes. Kind of, they're kind of subtle. Cold Hands was pretty big. It was a pretty big buff, I think, accidentally. I'm sure they didn't mean to, but for the most part, they were just little subtle incremental changes is what they've been doing, and they're measuring how the meta reacts and what needs fine tuned. And the point being, they don't seem to be doing anything crazy, like just completely pulling the rug out from underneath the build, making it completely terrible. And they're also not taking something that's being underplayed and just overly buffing it. They did with Golden Company swords, but that came with the neutrals limit and the buff to Varus, which I think is huge. I think that flies under the radar that Varus was buffed at the same time as the Golden Company swords. So now you're choosing between Varus, Peter, Golden Company swords, Flayed Men, Cutthroats, who are still really, really good. So I think they did a really nice job of finessing a lot of these changes. It's good to hear Carlo kind of agree for the most part on that.
Well, Carlo's not taking Night's Watch the Polish, mate. He's taking Bolton's.
Yeah, that's the flex right there. If you take Bolton's to Polish GT against that community and all of the people that go to play that community, you are the undisputed best Song of Ice and Fire player to ever live. I'll just
Look,
say
guys,
Yeah.
I very, very, very openly put my hands up and say, I'm not that good. I'm not that good. I could not win with Boltons.
Nice.
Fair enough. All right.
Oh, man. Well, yeah, again, Carlo, cheers for your time, mate. And yeah, we'll catch you soon, I guess.
Thanks for having me on. Thanks for everybody listening to me ramble. Once I get going, it's hard to have me stop. So thanks for anybody who's managed to make it through the whole thing. And thanks for talking to me, guys.
Thanks, man.
So, okay, guys, so just a quick update on this. So, obviously, Carlo didn't make the Polish Nationals. Unfortunately, his flight was cancelled due to the storm that had happened at the time. And obviously, a lot of what we've had a conversation about in this recording might have slightly changed, but it's still highly relevant. Obviously, we have seen the Season 4 update, which I feel, and myself, and I'm sure Carlo does well, is probably the most balanced that the game has been for a long, long time. The big announcement that I promised you at the beginning. So Yearcats Miniatures have been asked to run London Grand Tournament this year at the end of September. It's actually been given the official status by Seaman of UK Nationals as well. So it's something that we're really proud to be part of. It's a community that we are extremely focused on building. And obviously it's something that we want to make sure is fun for everybody on the day, that puts on a competitive event, and as I said, just it helps build the community. That is purely what this is about for us. So keep your eyes peeled. There'll be a few series coming out in relation to the LGT announcement or the UK National announcement. So keep them peeled, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you all there.